Okay, Beverly, I'm going to ask you for the record to tell me your full name.
Beverly Carpenter. I started teaching as Beverly O'Neill.
Okay. And you don't have a middle name there?
Ann.
Oh,
Beverly
okay.
Ann.
Oh, yes. There was a whole generation of Anns. My sister's one of them, yes.
Yes.
Did you have any nicknames growing up, or did you?
Oh, I had one.
Did you?
That I really didn't like.
Really? Okay.
Bubbles.
And you were given that by?
I think one of my aunts.
Uh-huh.
A couple of my aunts, and then my cousins picked it up, and
it stuck around the family.
Yes,
but it didn't
go into school.
It didn't
no.
go into. Fortunately for you,
right?
Particularly
in fact,
particularly when you got into high school, you wouldn't have wanted that nickname.
No, no, definitely not.
What were you going to say? You think something you started to say.
In fact, I think by the time I was in school, I had started to tell people not to call me that. I didn't like that.
Yes. Okay. And they honored the request.
Yes.
Now, what's your current family situation?
Well, I am married. My husband was an engineer, and this is his second marriage and my first. I got married late in life at 43. So on the day I got married, I became a wife, a mother, and a grandmother.
Oh, my. What a transition.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
with his children, how many children were there?
He has 3. He had 3. A boy, Frank, and then the 2 girls, Sheila and Susan. The youngest, Susan, passed away about 5 years ago. And she left a little granddaughter for us, who lives with her father and her new stepmother.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
they're a very happy family.
Great.
Yeah.
So you've had your own experiences being a stepmom then too.
Yes. In fact, it came in handy in teaching, because every once in a while there would be a student who, I'm getting a stepmother.
Yeah.
And
like the wicked stepmother. Right.
And I'd say to them, well, do you know I'm a stepmother? He'd look at me, no, you can't be,
Yes.
No.
That whole stereotype goes out the window.
And so I talked to them and about how it felt to be a stepmother coming into a new family, and how I understood how they felt, but that things would go along. And I know the one girl I really did help. She would come in and just about every day speak to me about something about her stepmother, and we'd talk about it. And I'd explain to her that, her stepmother was doing things just for her good. And I'd ask her, well, what did you do last night that was fun with your stepmother? And I'd keep going on to the good things that, and of course the things that the stepmother was doing was like making her go to bed by a certain time, or,
How cruel, right.
Right. How parents can be cruel sometimes. Right?
Yeah, how good that you were there, Beverly, and that's sometimes the role that we get a chance to play, too.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about the children. Let me ask you about, because I assume they're going to be very interested in watching this, too. Tell me their names and a little bit about each one of them.
Well, my stepson, Frank, he's in his late 40s now, and he has 3 children. He's married to Debbie, and he and Debbie met in the Air Force.
Oh, I see.
And their first children were a set of twins, Jonathan and Jennifer, who are now 18. And then Lindsay, who is 16. And he actually resigned from the Air Force She stayed in the Air Force.
Oh.
And then soon after he left, he was going to continue his schooling and go into paramedical or medical profession. And she was sent to Germany, and they had the twins at the time. So they moved to Germany, and he followed. And it was Lindsay, the 16-year-old, was born in Germany. And she was born several months before John and I got married. My husband and I got married. And we had gone over the year after to visit them.
Okay, all right.
And to introduce me to the family, because they weren't able to come from Germany to the wedding.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So then from Germany, they moved to Oklahoma, to England,
Yeah,
and
well,
now they're out in Montana.
That's a military family. That's,
Right,
yeah.
now they're out in Montana. And she's retired from the Air Force, and they're making Montana their home.
Oh, interesting. Oh.
Yeah.
Not too many people in Montana, so they ought to have
No,
plenty of
they're
room
in
to
Great
spread out.
Falls,
Yeah.
right.
Do you
We
visit? Do you
visited-
get? Have you?
We visited them there twice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We did visit them while they were in England, and we visited them in Germany and in Oklahoma.
Nice to have family you can stay with when you travel the world. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And now, and the other
And then
children.
there's Sheila. She's single. She's never been married. And she's a social worker for the state.
Uh-huh.
And right now she's an EPA. She's a social worker
For the environmental.
for the employers.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, for the employers.
I was about to name another federal
Employees.
agency. I see.
Yeah. And so she helps them with any social work problems that any problems that they have. And she's been working for the state for quite a few years now, and she really loves it. She's always helping people.
And how old was she when you guys met?
She was about 27.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
27, yeah. They were all in their 20s, and Susan,
okay.
the youngest, was single and lived with us when we first got married.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And Susan and I got along just like my mother and I did.
Oh, how wonderful. How wonderful. How fortunate for both of you.
Yes, yes. She was a very easy person to live with. She would get angry with me and go in a room and slam the door, and then 5 minutes later come out and it was all forgotten.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
And I'm the same way. I'll yell, get it out of my system, and that's it,
Great.
you know.
Move on.
Right. It's all forgotten, you know.
I'm going to, Beverly, when were you born?
I was born in 1939, in February, so I just turned 60.
Okay. So you were one of Roosevelt's babies then? Yes.
Yes.
And where would that have been?
In West Hempstead.
Really?
Yeah, I was born on Long Island and brought up on Long Island.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of your earliest childhood memories would have been what?
Well, I remember walking to school, and the school was close by, and I always loved school. I always liked my teachers, although there was one year in 2nd or 3rd grade where I had a teacher I did not like.
Yeah.
But that's really the only one I can remember that I shouldn't, you didn't hate her or anything
That's right,
like that,
yes.
but just didn't care for that much. But I remember deciding when I was about in 2nd grade, about 7 or 8 years old, that I wanted to become a teacher.
That early?
Yeah.
Wow.
And every once in a while I change, and you think of, going with the airlines or something like that. But I'd always come back to wanting to teach. And I was very active in school.
So you graduated from high school in the 50s then?
In 57.
Okay.
And I went to college up in Buffalo.
You went to elementary school in West
Hempstead. West Hempstead Junior Senior High. I graduated from in 57. And then I went to Buffalo State Teachers College. And I decided to go there because it was one of the few places that offered special education.
You really knew early on what you wanted to do with your life, didn't you?
Yeah, I really knew I wanted to teach.
Who was it that influenced you, or how you thought about it for sure? Because you've met a lot of kids who have no clue as to where they're going and what they want to do.
I think it was the teachers that I had early on. And my first and second grade teachers, really. And then I found out after I was teaching that my mother had always wanted to be a teacher and never finished high school, so she never became a teacher and, got married and...
Yeah.
But she never told me and never really, although I did get a lot of support, the only thing they didn't like, my father nor my mother cared for me going into special education. And this I had decided on while I was, I guess, a freshman in high school to go into special ed, because I used to babysit for a boy across the street, and he was mentally retarded. And they had another child, a daughter, who was younger, but they couldn't get anyone to babysit for them when they went out because the babysitters would be afraid of the son. And I just got along well with him. And it was working with him while I babysat that made me decide, hey, I wanted to help children like him. Wanted to teach children like him.
Well, there was no uncertainty then about the path that you pursued, right, from the earliest courses that you took.
Right. I just knew.
And now looking back, you know for sure you did not make a mistake.
No, I didn't. No, because I always loved teaching.
Yeah.
And I loved it right from the moment I started.
Yes.
I started teaching in Brentwood. I graduated from college in 1961. And I started...
In Buffalo now. That's a long way from
Buffalo.
home. That's a long way.
Yes.
From home. You graduated with a baccalaureate, I gather.
Yes.
And then did your graduate work while you were in the classroom?
Yes.
Like so many people did?
I used to drive into Columbia.
Wow.
I got my master's from Columbia. And I took it in educational psychology because...
Did you have any, Bev, did you have any of those famous people as teachers that we've all heard about that taught at Columbia at the time?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I'm afraid I didn't.
No, all right. Maybe you did, but we're not going to go over the names if there were. Who were some of your favorite professors at Columbia, though? Some of the people who had an impact on.
Do you know, I really honestly cannot remember their names.
Okay. All right. Did you have favorite high school teachers?
Yes. And one was, Manny Kafka. Manny Kafka was my social studies teacher in high school in West Hempstead.
Okay.
And he, of course, became very interested in NYSUT and became...
I should say he did.
Yes, he went higher up in NYSUT. And
And eventually became the representative to the retirees.
Right.
Until he passed away just last year.
Yes.
My goodness.
And it was interesting because I had met him, a few years after teaching. We had gone on a bus trip to protest Rockefeller's running for president in New Hampshire. And I was, you could tell, active a little bit in things. And we were going up to protest. And on this bus trip, I met Manny Kafka. Mm-hmm. And since then, with my involvement with the BTA and NYSUT, I've run into him. And so we've kept in contact right up until
yes,
the time of his death.
Yes. Wow.
Because after I retired, he also retired from NYSUT and, well, became the retirees delegate.
Mm-hmm. He must have been very gratified to meet you and to realize that he had influenced you at least sufficiently that you continued on your path.
That I was interested in the union.
Yes, okay.
He was very pleased about that,
mm-hmm.
you know, and that I kept on
Have
with the union.
Have you any awareness that any of the youngsters that you've had over the years have also gotten involved in education in any capacity? I guess there are some people that you are in touch with, that you stay in touch with.
Actually, with my former students, I have very little
You have very little
contact. Every once in a while, I hear from one
mm-hmm.
or two. I have one student now who is working with my stepdaughter.
Is that right?
Yes. And she went to be hired, and she was hired for this job as a part-time
mm-hmm.
or a learner in a learning capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And she was introduced to my daughter, and she says, "Oh, yes, I know her." And my stepdaughter looked at her and said, "Well, where do you know me from?"
Yeah.
She says, "Well, you went with Mrs. Carpenter camping. You took us camping." And I used to, with several other teachers, we take the kids out camping for 2 nights. And it was always a hard time getting chaperones. Yes. So I had 2 nice stepdaughters who I asked, and they did. In fact, I even had my husband one time as a chaperone.
Wow. Wow. That would have been a few years ago, Beverly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me bring you back to where we were talking a little bit about your mother a few minutes ago. And you said that she had a dream that apparently was deferred until you realized the dream, and that is to become a teacher.
Right.
Tell me a little something about your mom. What was she like?
My mother was a very homebody person, although she did work in the school district. First, when I was in elementary school, in the cafeteria. Uh-huh. So she had the same hours that my brother and I did.
She was a cafeteria lady.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And then she had many jobs in between mm-hmm. where she could keep an eye on us at the same time. And when my brother was in high school, she was working in the office. In the high school.
Oh, okay.
As a clerk.
I see.
And she was very interested in education. She and my father both thought education was very important. They were very happy that I wanted to go to college, and, you know, in fact, they put me through college. Mm-hmm. And my father had left school. My mother left school as a senior in high school. And my father was basically kicked out of school in the 8th grade. He was asked either to leave or they were going to put him out. and he left. But he was a self-taught man. He read an awful lot. He had all kinds of magazines and books. And my mother was a reader also, and I guess that's, I also read a lot.
I remember reading someplace, Beverly, that this was a few years ago now that I read this, and I hope that the system has changed sufficiently to I guess, fly in the face of what I'm about to say. But I remember reading somewhere a few years back that very often, the youngsters who are kicked out of school are among the most intelligent. Not necessarily intelligent in the ways that we measure intelligent, but they were very bright kids who, for some reason or other, had no patience with some of the other nonsense. And I think today schools may have changed somewhat to accommodate these various kinds of people. And your father sounds like, as you said, he was self-taught, he was very bright, but he ran into a problem at somewhere along the line.
In school.
And unfortunately, schools just used to cast people aside
Right.
instead of trying to find the key to unlock the talent that was there.
Yes.
Do you have any childhood memories of your father or of your mother that jump out at you as I ask this question?
Well, my mother, I can remember always being there. She was very, both my mother and father's families lived close by. My one aunt lived next door, a couple of blocks away lived my mother's sister. My grandparents lived, we were all very close. And my parents were just, my father, I remember him taking us to the firehouse. He was a Navy fireman.
Really? Okay.
He's a volunteer fireman.
He was a volunteer fireman.
And
what was his line of work? What did he do?
He drove a gasoline truck.
I see. Okay.
Made oil deliveries.
I see.
Oil truck. Sorry.
For home heating oil?
A home.
Yes.
To homes and I guess a few companies that he would deliver oil, but basically to different homes. And
but you're saying he's a fireman. He's a volunteer.
But he was a volunteer fireman. And he
would that have been in West Hampton?
In
West Hempstead, rather?
Yes, in the section of West Hempstead called Lakeview.
I see.
There's a little section called Lakeview. And he belonged to the Lakeview Fire Department. And I remember him, we even went on a couple of fire calls with him. But I remember him taking us there. And always on Christmas Day, on Christmas morning, when we'd get up, my mother would start cooking Christmas dinner.
Yes.
And my father would take my brother and I to visit, and we'd go and visit all the relatives, stop at all their houses for about a half an hour or so. And of course, we'd get all these presents, so of course my brother and I loved it.
Yes, that's great.
But, and then we'd get together for a great big family meal.
Yes. Okay, and that's the big family holiday, Christmas.
Right.
And would the rest of the relatives come to you? Is that?
Yes, although we used to have Christmas Eve dinner. It was my mother's parents were born in Poland. Were Polish, and on Christmas Eve dinner they had what they call a poor man's supper, and we always used to go to my grandmother's house for Christmas Eve dinner. And it was far from a poor dinner.
Yes, I guess.
There were many Polish dishes.
Yes. Now you mentioned that your maiden name was O'Neill. Your father's family
is Irish.
And do you know anything about his background and heritage and the name where?
Yeah, in fact, his mother lived in Donegal County, Ireland, which is up along the northwestern coast of Ireland. And just this past year, John, my husband, and I went to England to visit his relatives. My husband's from England. And I decided, no, I wanted to go to Ireland because I had a contact of a cousin in Ireland.
Okay.
So we went to see her. We rented a car, drove to Ireland.
Oh,
and
you're
saw
brave.
her.
You drove in Ireland.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
And we went, and my father's family, I actually went to visited the house that my grandmother was born in.
Oh, wonderful.
And
Would have been your father's mother.
yeah, they were farmers. And since have gone, there's one cousin who is still in the farming. He still has the old homestead farm.
My goodness.
The house that my grandmother was born in is now used for storage because it has no electricity, heating, or that. And it's a thatched roof. But I remember visiting there about 35 years ago. And at that time, the cousin that I stayed with this time, it was her parents that I had visited were living in the house and had showed me the house then. So I saw it as my grandmother had lived in it. The house they never changed the house.
Yes.
In fact, when I went to visit, they were cooking over the fireplace and used the fireplace for the
very rural
heating.
and very rustic, to say the least. Yes.
Yeah, and the thatched roof.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about he came here as an immigrant, did your father then?
His parents came.
Oh, his parents came, so he came with his parents.
Right. And I think my father was actually born here.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And his father died. His father was a fireman, a New York City fireman.
Oh.
And he died in an accident when my father was about 12.
Automobile accident?
No, it was something to do with a fire.
My goodness.
But I'm not exactly too sure what.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one brother.
One brother. Okay. Were you older or younger than?
He was younger, about 4 years younger. And I remember we were constantly arguing, fighting. Not fist fights, arguing. Yes. And when I left and went to college, and then he graduated from high school, and after he graduated from high school and went into the Marines, we became very close. And he'd come home from the Marines, and I was then started teaching, and we'd go out together, his friends and my friends.
Yeah.
And we've really been very close all along. My brother just passed away in November.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
November.
that.
But he became a fireman. My parents had always wanted him to go to college. They even promised him if he went to college, they'd buy him a car. But he wouldn't go to college.
Had none of it.
And he worked for the gas company down in Washington, D.C. He stayed there from the Marines. He was down in Virginia. And in Washington, D.C., he was stationed most of the time. And he liked that area. So he decided to stay there, and he couldn't stay in Long Island. He said it was too crowded. And I know whenever he'd come up to visit, he'd say, "This is the last time I am coming up here."
Yes. Didn't go for it. No.
And of course, he always came back up.
Yes, of course.
He
How old was your brother when he died?
He was 54. Let's see. No, he was 55. He was
Well,
55.
he was still young, put it that way.
Yeah.
Were there, we talked a little bit about this before we began, Bev, but I'm just wondering, were there other adult influences in your formative years? Your teachers, I suspect, and your earliest teachers, besides mother and father, were there other adult influences that are important as you look back at them?
Well, I always remember one teacher, Mrs. Callway,
Mm-hmm.
and I had her in 8th grade. And I don't know, I just wanted to be a teacher like her.
Okay.
Oh,
You had already decided, though, early on that
Right.
you were going to be a teacher. So
Yes.
she wasn't the person that
No.
made that. She just kind of reinforced that, yes, this is what I want. I want to be like her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Actually, it was Mr. Callway I had in 8th grade. It was Mrs. Callway I had in 2nd grade.
Okay, there it is.
She was
so she was
influence.
the influence.
Yes.
Okay. What was life like in West Hempstead growing up as a kid? What was it like for you? Now, this would have been in the 40s, really,
Right.
during the war
Right.
years.
Well, I remember very little of the war. I do remember the blackouts.
You do?
But, yeah. And I remember I used to hate the black blinds that you had on the windows.
Right, the shades that would be pulled down.
Right. And I remember I used to hate them. But, and I remember my uncles coming home and in their uniforms and visiting us.
They were in the military at the time.
Yes. One was in the Navy, another was in the Army. My father was not able to go into the service, which I guess was fortunate for my brother and I because it kept our family together. But the whole town knew everyone. You know, everybody knew everyone. And where they argue today about who brings up a child, and now they're going into the whole village does. I know it was the whole village when I was there because when you went out to play and you didn't get into very bad mischief because you knew somebody was going to see you and they would tell your parents because everybody knew one another.
Yep, the word would get back fast enough.
And you know, if you were impolite to someone would turn around and say, "Now, Beverly, you better watch that because I'm going to tell your mother."
Yes. Yes.
And people would prevent you from doing something wrong. A stranger, or actually it wasn't a stranger, it would be someone basically you knew. But even if it was a stranger and they told you not to do something that you were about to do that was wrong.
There was a time, I suspect, that people, instead of saying it's none of my business, they would say it is my business.
It is my business, right.
To get involved.
Yes. They used to.
Yeah.
And I know there are some ways that I take after my mother. I've become interested in the children in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And if I see them doing something wrong, I'll say something.
Yes. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the parents, will usually
West Hempstead
agree.
In those days was, I dare say, suburban, but it was almost rural. It was country.
Yeah.
Very
in
much
fact,
so.
Down the street from us, the end of our block finished at a farm.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
now
was
it's all houses, but
in some ways much simpler and more innocent time to grow up.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Not like today.
And it was easier. I think it was also easier. It kept you.
Do you remember the day either the war began or the war ended? You said you didn't remember much about the war, but do you have any?
Well, I was about 2 when it started.
When it started, so you wouldn't have remembered that.
But I do remember when it ended. I remember everybody being very excited and very happy And we were planning on, having a big family get-together to celebrate the coming homes of my uncles.
Oh, sure, sure.
And we were glad because we were going to be able to get chocolate again.
That's right. All the things that people miss.
Right.
And kids particularly miss.
Yeah.
Remember the collections for the war effort of various things? Or
yes.
the trips to the butcher with the coupons. And
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's bizarre. It seems like only yesterday in some respects, and at the same time, it seems like another lifetime away, all those memories.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have any childhood or high school friends that you maintained connections with over the years?
There is one from high school, and actually it was right from elementary school right on up through high school.
Yeah.
In fact, there are a couple.
Yeah,
that I
that's
think
a precious. I think that's precious to have that in your life. There are very few people that know someone else for as many years as.
Yeah, I know the one friend that I had. We kind of lost touch.
Mm-hmm. That happens too. Sure.
And then after she was married and I was living in Sayville and teaching already, quite a few years. We met in Sayville in one of the stores.
Okay, great.
And then we went to political fundraisers and met one another.
Yes, okay.
So we kind of reconnected. And I do only see her when I run into her at the store.
Okay. I was going to ask you if, and I don't want to forget to ask, if there were any chores that growing up that you remember that you were expected to take care of, or jobs that you were assigned at home that you had to do, that you either remember fondly or maybe you don't you don't like too much the memory.
Well, I never have been one to like any of the domestic chores. I was not interested in cooking. And cleaning was definitely out. Of course, I did have to do chores. And I remember having to do the bathroom when I was in high school. And on Saturday morning, I had to clean the bathroom before I could go out.
Okay.
So I remember, like putting that off until the last minute. And sometimes my friend would come and she'd say, "Come on, we're going."
Yes.
We were either going shopping into Hempstead or something, and I'd have to finish doing the bathroom first.
You mentioned Hempstead. Triggers a memory for me because Hempstead was very different then and now.
Yes.
This was before the before the Roosevelt Field Mall.
Oh, yes.
And downtown Hempstead was a shopping mecca for much of Long Island at that time.
It was.
Yeah.
In fact, I used to work, while I was in high school, I worked a year or two in H.L. Green's, a 5 and dime store in Hempstead.
Would that have been your first paying job, or was there something before that you were paid for, Bev?
No, I think that's my first paying job.
Okay. That was like a 5 and dime? Is that
a 5 and dime, yeah. And then from there, I went and worked in the supermarket as a cashier.
Okay.
And this was in high school, saving money for college.
You've said that you loved school right from the beginning. You enjoyed it. What other interests did you have as a kid growing up?
Well, I was interested. I don't really remember that many interests in elementary school, but in high school I was very interested in the student council. And I always took part in that.
Yeah, there she was. So the organizational lady.
And in fact, that was the main thing. And then I did a little, not cheerleading, it was gunnerettes. No, that was was something like that, where we just would march and do
pep squad
different
of some
things.
sort,
Yeah,
I guess,
a pep squad for the team. And then also I followed through on both of those activities in college.
Did you? Okay.
Yes. I was very involved in the student council in college.
So you've always been politically inclined then in one way or another.
Yes,
Active.
and I think I got this from my mother.
Did you?
Yes.
Was she active?
She and my father would always discuss everything at home. And she was more involved with the Democratic Party. And she worked as a, not as a poll watcher, I'm a poll watcher now.
Committee person or no?
No. Well, I think she was a committee person, but I'm not really too sure.
Okay.
But inspectors.
Okay.
She was an inspector
yes.
for many years. In fact, the first time that I went to vote.
In the Board of Elections?
Yes.
An inspector, yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure everything is on the up and up.
Well, they're at the polls. When you go to vote, they're the people who sit behind the desk and take your names. And
I see.
They're called inspectors.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. And that's what she did.
Okay.
And
I wanted to ask you if now a lot of years have gone by since that time. Have you changed your orientation, or are you still a morning person or a night person? Or
I have always been a night person.
A night person.
And I still am.
You still are, okay.
I remember I always, and I still dislike getting up in the morning, early in the morning.
Oh, dear.
And I remember all through my teaching in college, I used to hate to get up in the morning. Once I got to school, I was fine. Or on my way to school, I was fine because, as I said, I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed all my years of teaching.
Yes. Yeah, but getting up I agree with you, getting up at those hours.
Once I got up and was on my way, and it was fine.
You must have made a very smooth transition on your very first day of school then, as a youngster when you were first taken to school. If you had a good feeling about school, I don't know if you remember your first day, but I suspect that you made a smooth transition, did you?
I did. I can remember I started in the middle of the year.
Oh.
Because my birthday came in February, and then
I see.
You weren't allowed to start before you were 5.
Yes.
So I did start in the middle of the year, and in fact, I was left back in kindergarten.
Because of your age?
Because of my age. I wasn't old enough to go on to first grade.
So you got an additional kindergarten experience.
Right. So I had a year and a half of kindergarten.
Okay. Well, I think maybe that's why people can point and say, look how successful you were in your life. That's the reason why. Did you have, throughout school, were there certain subjects that you just didn't enjoy? Least favorite subjects?
Actually, I think my least favorite was history.
Okay.
And
your favorites?
And yet, today, and in fact, ever since I've gotten out of college, my thing has been traveling, and I like to read up on the places that I've been to.
Yeah. But we're in different places at different times in our lives. At one point, something that you don't think you're going to enjoy. I used to hate broccoli. like the president, But,
all right.
Your favorite subjects in school obviously were?
Math.
Okay.
That was my favorite. In fact, my high school teachers were astounded. Well, first of all, they didn't think I should be a teacher because they said I was too quiet and too shy. And yet I was involved in the student council in that. But, then when they said, all right, if you're going to be a teacher, then how come not math? How come special education? Because they knew that was what I wanted to go into. And I told them, I said, I like math, and it comes easy to me. It comes too easy to me. I said, if I go and try and teach something to children that came too easy to me, I'm afraid that I wouldn't have the patience with them.
Yeah. Interesting. Probably that's a good insight. When did you come to Brentwood, Ben?
I came right in 61. When I was preparing to graduate from college and you send out for interviews, there weren't that many school districts that had special education classes.
But Brentwood at that time was known for its special education program.
Yes, it was. And I had an interview at Garden City and in Brentwood. So I remember I was interviewed at Garden City, but then told that that they only take experienced teachers, and they hoped that I would, in 2 or 3 years, come back.
Get your experience someplace else.
Right. And I remember coming home and saying, no. If some school district takes me and gives me the experience, then why should I go to some district that didn't want me because I was inexperienced?
I don't know if you remember, but back at that particular time, teachers came to Brentwood and left after 2 and 3 years all the time. Do you remember the turnover back in?
Yes.
That's exactly what people were doing, getting their experience here and going elsewhere.
Yes.
You were one of those who was loyal.
I stayed.
You stayed.
Well, I did think of leaving Brentwood twice. Once I was going to go up to Buffalo and be near college friends and that. And
this must have been early on then.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't too early on. About 10 years. I was going to have to take such a big cut in salary.
Oh, yes. At that point, yeah.
And I said, no, I'm not willing to do that. Plus, Brentwood, the special ed department continued to grow.
Who interviewed you?
Gabriel Simches.
Some people will remember him.
And he was in charge of special ed, the director of special education. He had a very small office. In fact, the day I came out and interviewed him, we met at a school. I had a college friend who was teaching here in Brentwood in special ed. And so he met me at Northwest Elementary. It was an elementary school then. And I remember as part of my interview, he took me out for lunch at a hot dog stand.
Really?
Yes. But I really liked him. I liked the feeling that I got.
Do you remember any of the questions that were asked? Or any part of the interview? Besides the hot dog lunch, I know you remember
I remember him asking me what made me go into special ed. And then one of his questions was, what was the difference between teaching a regular class and a special ed class as far as the curriculum went? And I remember telling him that although you did try and teach the children reading and that mostly concentrated on self-care skills.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he had wanted to hear, that, the actually taking care of themselves was going to be an important part.
I bet, yeah. Mm-hmm. Has your opinion of special ed changed over the years? The experience of being a teacher in special ed has certainly given you a lot to think about and learned a lot, but have you changed any of your perspective?
The children, there are more complex problems today. In the classroom, with the children, amongst the parents, even when I first started teaching, if I had a problem with either something that I was teaching or with the students or within the school, such as we wanted to attend the assembly programs,
Yes.
it was easy to go to the principal and talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
It was Gabe Simches. I remember going into his office and actually sitting in his office and crying and being in tears over a problem I had in the classroom. And he'd just hand me the box of tissues and say, okay, tell me what happened. Tell me what's bothering you, you know. And you actually...
Accessibility was there,
Right.
too.
The accessibility was there. And there was a real interest in the problems that you were having in the classroom and in helping you to solve them.
The bureaucracy must have grown enormously.
It had. It has. Because there were only... The special ed department was very small. You knew all of the teachers in special ed. And when I left Brentwood 5 years ago, it'll be this June that I retired, I didn't know half of the teachers in special ed.
Now, Pete Perlow was probably not even in the department or not even here at that point. Was Howard Brodsky in special ed when you arrived?
He was a teacher.
He was a teacher in the system. Okay.
Yeah, in the high school.
Okay. Well,
Or
as you
I don't think he was here.
okay.
He came later on.
Okay. Yeah, well, you mentioned something that I think should be underscored, and that is that Brentwood had a reputation far and wide for really doing something for kids who were challenged in one way or another.
Right, they did.
And parents would bring their children and move to Brentwood
Yes.
for that reason, to take advantage of the support system that
Yes,
existed.
in fact, when I first started teaching, we used to make home visits. They were required.
I see.
At least one a year, where you had to go and visit each child's home. And I remember speaking to parents, and parents telling me that they moved to Brentwood because of the special ed.
One of the things that also grew...
And that's still true.
I believe it is still true. One of the things I was going to say that also grew, in addition to the bureaucracy, is the state mandates and state regulations and all of that.
There's much more paperwork today, and it takes much longer to get things done. I remember I had very little paperwork. The paperwork that I did was created myself. My plan book was mine. I didn't turn it in, ever. As long as I had something there for a sub, but the plan book was for me. And that we used to turn in our plan books to Gabe Simches at the end of the year, so he could review what we had done. Also, your observations. We were asked, do you want announced or unannounced observations? I chose unannounced. So that meant that Gabe Simches could walk in and say, I'm here to observe you.
Yes.
Fine, you know?
Right.
And one day he caught me at a very bad time. I was teaching, we were on split sessions. I was teaching from 12 to 4. And I had been registering for a class at Columbia the night before, couldn't finish. So I had to get up early the next morning, go into the city to finish registering. I got a parking ticket in the city that day. I was late coming back to get to school on time.
No wonder you remember it so well, yes.
And I got a speeding ticket. Then as I pull into the parking lot, the buses are pulling in. And who pulls in next to me? The Gabe Simches. Hi, Beverly. I'm here to observe you. I just looked at him and I said, "Oh, no." He says, "What's the matter?" And I told him.
Yeah.
He said, "Well, then you haven't had lunch or a cup of coffee or anything since early this morning." I said, "Right." I said, "I'll have to wait until 4, when we got out." He said, "No." He says, "I'm not going to observe you, but I'm going to work a little bit with your class." He says, "You go, get a cup of coffee, a bite to eat, take a half an hour, and I'm going to be with your class for the first half hour." He says, "And I'll come and observe you another time on a better day." Now, today, you would not find that happening. Well, first of all, there's no split session, so you wouldn't be going in.
Yes,
But
that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yes.
That story. It does. Of what very often we feel is missing.
Yeah. There was just a much more personal
Now, it
level
doesn't
of
have to be
contact.
missing, and I'm sure in some cases it's not missing. But when it's not there, boy, you sure know it's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you came to Brentwood because of the special ed program and because the Garden City offered you a rather unattractive alternative
Right.
in terms of your opportunity.
Yes. And Brentwood was one of the few school districts that had a special ed department.
Yes. Okay. At that time,
Yeah.
sure. Well, once again, the innovators, the trailblazers
They
here.
were.
Your first impression of the district when you arrived, or of the community? Now, where'd you live? You were commuting from someplace.
I actually moved in with this college friend and I. We had a house in Central Islip.
Okay.
And there were one or two other teachers from Brentwood.
There were quite a few young people like yourself at that point who just started Brentwood and were living in the area, or had roomies and so on to get started. That was fairly typical of the time.
Yes,
wasn't it? Yeah.
and the time I came, there were a lot of young people. I remember we used to have a lot of parties as teachers.
Yes.
There was a special ed Christmas party, and the BTA used to have a Christmas party where all the teachers could attend.
Yes.
Today,
Yes.
there are so many teachers, it became impossible. Yeah. But we also
used
to have the
very
party
much
in the
a
schools.
family, an extended family type of feeling about it. Right?
There was the high school.
Mm-hmm.
I think 1 or 2 junior highs and 6 elementary schools. That's all that that Brentwood was and that to me was Brentwood was a lot bigger to me than I remember as a child. As a child, we used to come out to Lake Ronkonkoma and pass through Brentwood.
Oh, I see.
On our way to Lake Ronkonkoma.
But you had no idea how the size of it.
Right. And, well, then in the 40s, it wasn't that big, Brentwood.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So when I came out here to teach, it was a big school district then.
Yes.
It was already,
But in those years also, Brentwood was in the middle of the post-war boom, so there was building and developments and enrollment was climbing.
Every year it seemed like a new school was being built.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
Did you always teach the same grades?
No.
First of all, what were you certified in?
I was certified to teach the mentally retarded or the mentally handicapped.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It has gone.
The names
keep and they did change constantly through the years.
Yes.
But that is what and also elementary education, K through 6 or 8.
Okay.
I was certified to teach when I graduated from college.
And then your experience in Brentwood was to teach all of those areas?
I only taught special ed, and I had a class for the mentally retarded.
Oh, I see.
And I stayed with mentally handicapped all my years. I taught in Brentwood for 33 years.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, when I'd go to leave, and I'd, look at another district, they just didn't have what Brentwood did.
No. Nor did they have, I dare say, the miracles to point to that have occurred here as a result of people like yourself, Beverly, and what you've done.
Well, I hope I've contributed some.
Well, first of all, let me just say there's no doubt in the minds of the people watching this that you did more than contribute some in terms of your commitment. During those early years, do you remember any of the other people that shared the hallway with you or that you worked with? Some of the first?
Well, the principal I had was Lou Latito.
Okay.
And he didn't like special ed.
Really?
No, but Nancy Dew was someone who has left the district a long time ago. And Jane Kochendorfer was some of the teachers that I taught with. And the Sustrin twins were there at Northwest.
I know there are people nodding and smiling as you mention these names, people who remember.
Oh, and I can picture the people, and I can't think of the names.
That's okay. Were you involved with other programs or other outside of the class over the year? Now, I'm not talking about professional organization. I'm talking about with students or with parents or in the district. Were there other involvements that you gave your time to? Well,
when I taught for about 4 years in the elementary school, and then I moved up to the junior high school.
Oh, I see.
And while I was in the junior high school, the kids were not involved in going to see basketball games and things like that. And I started, which you would never do today, but I used to take two of my students, either 2 girls or 2 boys, on a weekend. Or some of the boys, after school, there'd be a game or something that they'd be interested in. They had no way of getting to it. So I used to take them. I'd have their parents' permission, and I'd take them to the games. And we'd stop at McDonald's or something like that afterwards, and I'd bring them home.
Yes.
And also on Saturdays. And I used to set it up that with the girls, I would take 2 of them, and they would come and spend the night with me, Saturday night with me. I'd pick them up on Saturday morning. We'd go grocery shopping, and they'd choose what they wanted to have for dinner. And actually, I could cook then, and I used to cook with them. And they'd plan out what we were having for dinner, and we'd make the dinner. We'd go to the movies, and they'd spend the night with me, and then in the morning, after breakfast, I would take them home.
Wonderful memories you've given a lot of people.
But this is something that a teacher couldn't do
could
today.
Not do today. For lots of practical reasons.
Right.
For insurance purposes, for all the litigious reasons that this culture has evolved into so legalistic.
Right. And at that time, you would have the parents' permission, and I'd even check out the movie that we were going to see to make sure it was appropriate for them.
We talked a little bit earlier about the out-of-pocket expenses. You mentioned stopping at McDonald's on the way home. Of course, that was out of your pocket, as were many of these other
Oh, yeah, when I take them shopping.
accessories
take them to
that
the
you would
movies.
purchase.
Yes.
And that all came out of
Yeah.
Beverly's
Yes.
pocket. And that part of it probably hasn't changed for a lot of teachers today. I would imagine they're still doing the same thing.
Right.
No.
That is right.
Outside of the purpose that your career, that your job description offered in terms of its written description of what your purpose was in the classroom, you had your own purpose for being a teacher. You knew it from the second grade on. How would you define what you saw your purpose as? Why were you there?
I really wanted to help the disabled. To help, as I had grown to know this boy that I babysat for, I really wanted other people to accept the handicapped.
Yes.
And to treat them as
Do you think that the
other
change,
people.
I know special ed still has a certain label attached to it, so that if a youngster is placed, evaluated and placed in special education, there's a certain label attached to that. And so over the years, you've mentioned that the labels have changed, and instead of calling somebody handicapped, for example, they say they're challenged in a given way.
right, or
Are you sympathetic to those kinds of changes that have occurred, or do you have any feelings or thoughts about them?
basically, I found that as you change the label, then that label becomes tainted.
Okay.
So why not? We started out calling them mentally retarded. What we have to do is not change the name mentally retarded, but change our perspective.
Maybe eliminate the labels altogether.
Actually, to some extent, I think it's good to have for a teacher to know that this child has a difficulty.
Okay, all right.
And this describes it. And I do believe in having the segregated special ed classes.
Okay.
There are some students who cannot work in a regular classroom.
To identify and address those needs that exist
right.
in a very practical way.
Yes.
Yeah, and a compassionate way. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think there needs to be, I think they do need to be in a regular school, like we have them here.
Yes.
And I remember there was one classroom teacher I had gotten to know quite well. And her class had recess the same time my class had recess. And some of her kids would come over to play, because actually even on the playground, they would be segregated. Well, the classes would stay together.
Yes, sure.
And, but once in a while they'd mingle some. And we used to allow it, of course.
Sure.
But this one class, the students went back and was asking their teacher questions, and she couldn't answer all of them.
I see.
So she came and asked me if I would be willing to go on when the children had gym or art or music, to go and speak with her class. So I did, and I answered their questions, and I invited them to come down to my classroom. So they did. A few of the students at a time would come down for a half an hour and work with us. And it made a lot of understanding.
I'm sure it did.
Unfortunately, this is not something that is easy to continue with.
No. The opportunity presented itself there.
But yes.
Yeah.
And of course, this teacher and I both took advantage of it.
Great. We also made a little reference before to the fact that you have been politically inclined and organizationally inclined since you were a very young person, all the way through your educational experience, even at college, and then into Brentwood. When did you first start to get active with the organization, the Brentwood Teachers Organization, which it was before the union? Was it before you had tenure, after you had tenure? Do you remember those early connections and the early?
Well, when I first came to Brentwood, the BTA was, of course, much smaller because the district was much smaller. And at first, it was through the parties.
Okay, that makes
and
sense.
Then,
sure.
After, I'm not too, I know it was after tenure.
Okay.
That I became involved with the
Now,
BTA.
tenure back then was 3 years.
Yes.
And the parties, you're talking about end-of-year socials, Christmas socials, the picnic, and the those
Yes.
sort of, and then of course you had departmental socials, so you get to mingle and meet people and so on.
Right.
And heard about the organization.
I knew regular class teachers in the other buildings also.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
How were you active at first? What was the first?
Well, first I became a delegate.
Oh. So you were elected by, I guess, your building, or?
Yes. And
did you go to? Then you went to the
then I went
organizational
to the meetings.
meetings.
And then I became a chief delegate. And I was very active as a chief delegate. You know, really involved with the building. I really held meetings and got the teachers involved somewhat. And of course, I was then at Twin Pines and working with Pete Demento. And he and I would have disagreements. But I will say that even with our disagreements, we still had a good relationship.
I was going to say, you had a relationship before you had the disagreement, so that you were able to work through.
Yeah. And he never, I remember there was one time he and I were in the hall having a rather heated discussion. And one of the teachers went by and thought, ooh, he's really fighting into her. And he came in afterwards and said, I didn't know whether to interrupt or what. And I said, no, it was good you didn't. I said, everything's fine. I said, we both just got a little heated. I said, and he didn't mean anything personally, and I didn't take anything personally.
Right.
I said it.
And your personality being what it is, as soon as it was over anyway. You didn't carry on. Yeah.
Right.
You'd grown up with that example. You also mentioned earlier that your awareness of unions really.
My father was very active in the union.
So you got an early education in what it meant to be a member of a union.
Yes.
Has your definition changed over the years of union?
No. I still think they're very, very important. The thing that I find unfortunate is that many of the younger people are growing up with the idea that all unions, like some of the big unions, the heads are crooked. They're just out to take the people. And that unions are therefore bad.
That's a
And,
rather broad brush to paint unionism with, yes.
but, and when, I don't think that the teachers coming in, the new teachers coming in see the teachers union as bad, but as really not necessary. Because they have all the things. When I first started teaching, I remember I started out, I had no supplies.
Do you remember how much you made your first year?
$5,250 a year.
Before taxes.
Yes, and that was I started out with one of the highest salaries in the special ed department from Buffalo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you have to have a second job at any time, Beverly? While
No,
you were
I
teaching?
didn't.
You didn't. Okay.
And in fact, I never worked during the summers either.
Great. Oh, you were so lucky. Oh my goodness, you were lucky.
Somehow or other,
Yes,
I
you
managed
Okay.
on that. But getting back to when I first started, you walked in, you had the class, you ate lunch with them. There was no lunch. Special ed teachers had no lunch hour. The children did have gym, but you, as the special ed teacher, had to be in the gym with them. They did not have, the students had no art or music other than what you gave them.
You sound like
now.
You sound like a captive. You sound like you were a
Yeah,
captive.
you were. It was hard to just go to the ladies' room.
Wow. Wow.
But the union brought about all the changes.
What of your accomplishments were you most proud of? When you look back at your professional accomplishment, Beverly, what were you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I was proud of the fact that in teaching, other teachers that I worked with looked up to me and would come to me for advice. And I would give it to them. And sometimes it got me into a little trouble with the administration.
Yes.
But most of the times it didn't. But because I would, stand by the district rules and regulations and all of that. I did believe they had to be followed and were best followed.
You got certainly recognized by your peers as one of the masters in your area that you could be trusted for information.
Yeah, and afterwards, I always tell them the truth.
Yes. That's a good answer.
And working with the students and the other teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I first retired, they would call me and tell me that I was missed.
Nice.
And that was good.
Wonderful. That's exactly the point that I wanted to get to now, because we're running very short of time. As we've moved along here, I haven't even discussed with you the year of your retirement, what you've been doing since your retirement, and what you might have missed now that you're no longer active in your former capacity. First of all, what year did you retire?
I retired in 1994.
Okay. You've had a chance to miss a few things then, or to enjoy a few things. What are you doing?
What am I doing? Well, I am involved in R.O.B.S. I was a little bit more involved by being corresponding secretary, the recording secretary, which I no longer am. But besides that, I am involved in local politics. I am a Democratic committee person. And I have been since I was also involved in that while I was teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I am involved with the Great Panthers of Suffolk County.
Oh, that's
It's a very little known group, but I am one of the co-conveners or the co-president of it and very involved in that. And that takes you off into many different areas. And I also do my quilting and counter cross stitch.
So I learned
like
just
that.
the other day.
Yes.
Wonderful, beautiful things that you brought.
Thank you.
So you haven't let any moss grow on you since
Actually,
you
yes. I am basically a home. I love to stay at home.
Yes.
I love to read and watch television. But I also like to get out.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. But you managed to do
things.
certainly both of those things. And I haven't seen you slowing down at all, Beverly. I haven't seen you slowing
Well,
down. You
my
just
husband would say
appreciating.
I have.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I see.
But because he's very involved in healthcare,
Uh-huh.
in getting universal health care for all. So he's very involved and attends a lot of meetings with that. As
Okay.
part of the representing the Gray Panthers, I do go to some of the meetings with him.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm very interested in universal health care.
Sure,
Also.
and you therefore become a resource to all of our R.O.B.S members with the information that you can gather from all your other
Yes.
sources on healthcare, which is a primary concern for all of us as well. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to mention before we conclude here today?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I
Because
think we've covered an awful lot.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate
I know
the
I've
time.
rambled away from your questions.
No, that's the
a
whole
lot.
purpose of this, to go wherever we go. I hope that we've done justice to your career and at your time you have been a very gifted teacher, and you have given so much to this district, and you continue to give so much to the community, both the professional community and the community of taxpayers. I hope someday that others will have a chance to look at this interview and learn about you as I have. Thank you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.